Good afternoon and welcome to the regular meeting of Sunshine Ordinance Task Force Education Outreach and Training Committee. The time is 4:20. Mr. Clerk, could you call the roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Member Costa?
Here.
Costa present. Member West?
Here.
West present. Member Manny? Manny excused.
Excellent.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk, could you call agenda item 1, please?
The first item is the adoption of the July 14, 2011 regular meeting minutes.
Thanks. So I have one note on this. Agenda item 3 from those minutes. We didn't end up hearing that. And is there some way we can put an indication that the item was moved, or it was moved?
Call of the chair.
It was the call of the chair. Can we put some sort of indication
Certainly.
in there?
Yes.
Is it possible to adopt the minutes with that change?
Yes, you can.
And should we vote, or can we just do it without objection?
Without objection, and you can vote.
Okay. Without objection, can we adopt the minutes? Okay.
Okay.
Terrific. Mr. Clerk, will you call the next agenda item, please?
Item number 2 is hearing on the status of the January 2011 order of determination regarding Ray Hartz against the Police Commission.
Thank you. At this time, the complainant has 5 minutes to present his facts and evidence.
Task Force members, Ray Hartz, Director of San Francisco Open Government, and this is regarding complaint number 10050. And actually, the substance of this complaint occurred a year ago today, this month. So I don't want to go back and re-argue the entire case in front of you, but just to very briefly recap. Basically, I got up to make a comment. After about 35 seconds, I was stopped and told that I couldn't comment on it, that I was limited to the substance of the matter and couldn't make any comments other than that, which is actually incorrect. In the presentation, the case was presented. They said, well, it wouldn't happen, but the order of determination stated that I had been interrupted, and the findings of fact and law said, judging from the testimony and evidence presented, the task force finds that Mr. Hartz's comments to the commission constituted criticism protected by 6715D, and that the commission abridged the criticism in violation of same. It has been, as I said, a year since the original determination, and there has been absolutely no effort on the part of Mr. Mizuko, who is now the president of the commission, nor the commission itself, to reach out to me in any way, shape, manner, or form. My personal feeling is that Commissioner Mizuko just ignores the fact that he has been found in violation. So I'm going to ask you, since a year has transpired, to consider sending it back to the task force with a recommendation that it be referred to the Ethics Commission for further action. I am also going to ask you to consider recommending to the full task force a violation of the Brown Act. In particular, Section 54954.3, Public's Right to Testify at Meetings. Subsection C, which reads in part, the legislative body of a local agency shall not prohibit public criticism of the policies, procedures, programs, or services of the agency or of the acts or omissions of the legislative body. And since that was exactly what I was doing, I think they very clearly not only violated Sunshine, which they have already been found in violation, but that also was a violation of the Brown Act. So I would like you to consider sending back the recommendation that, number 1, again, that this be sent to ethics for further action, and that, number 2, they consider adding the Brown Act violation as an additional matter in this case. Now, I'm going to refer you very briefly to a letter that was sent by Lieutenant Joe Riley at the time of the original complaint. One of the paragraphs says, the Vice President of the Commission commented to the complainant that comments on agenda items are confined to the subject matter of the agenda item itself. And that is not true. And the reason I feel this is particularly egregious is the fact that Thomas Mizuko is a practicing attorney, member of the California Bar, and a former prosecutor. And so for him to sit there and say that, no, I can restrict what you're going to say in a public forum is really flies in the face of all sense of reason. I think he knew when he did it that what he was doing was wrong. He went ahead and did it anyway, and I think the fact that a year has gone by and he has made absolutely no effort to reach out in any way, shape, manner, or form, or give any indication that he respects the fact that the task force found him in violation is sufficient to make these two reasonable requests. Thank you.
Thank you. And is there anybody here to present facts and evidence in support of the complainant? Seeing none, the respondent will have 5 minutes to present facts and evidence.
Lieutenant Tim Falvey, Secretary of San Francisco Police Commission. We've argued this thing before. Our rules are set up that we do have one item on our agenda for general public comment, and then the public comment related to each item after that should be specific to that item so that we can run a meeting that doesn't go till 4 in the morning every day. And when I watched the tape, Mr. Hartz's comments started off sounding like they were more of the general public comment nature as opposed to what was the item the public comment was for, which was the particular items just discussed. So once he said, no, I'm getting to that, Mr. Mizuko said, oh, okay. And then he walked away. He said that he was interrupted. He was allowed to finish. He chose not to. He got up and commented on the next item and continued his thoughts. That was the basis of my argument that night. I didn't read in the Sunshine Ordinance where when there's an order of determination, you have to go out and contact the complainant and say anything. And so his argument that Mr. Mizuko has made no effort to contact him is irrelevant. But I will tell you this. As part of being on a commission, the commissioners are required each year to attend some kind of training. And I've brought with me copies of their Sunshine Ordinance declarations. And I think what's really important about these declarations, I have one for Dr. Marshall because he was on the initial complaint. I don't know that anything was made a determination against him. But I have Commissioner Mizuko's as well. This incident occurred back on September 22nd of 2010. The order of determination came as a result of a hearing held by the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force on January 20th, 2011. Since that time, actually all the commissioners have submitted their paperwork saying that they have completed the Sunshine Ordinance training requirements. I noticed that we're here for the education and outreach. I think education and retraining for a first offense is far more productive than beating a dead horse. So I just look at it this way, is since the time of your order of determination, Commissioner Mizuko and all the commissioners have completed the annual Sunshine Ordinance training. And I believe based on that fact, you could consider them retrained. In this issue, I would recommend and respectfully request that you return to the full body that this matter has been properly addressed in the form that every commissioner, including Commissioner Mizuko, the primary person of this complaint, has, since your order of determination, completed the requisite training. And if you were going to recommend any retraining, I would argue that that has been done. This has been taken care of. The fact that there was no outreach to Mr. Hartz in over a year, I believe this matter was continued a time or two. So that's nothing to do with Mr. Mizuko. And so I would strongly urge that, in all fairness, I mean, this is over a year old, and or getting up to a year old, rather. And the retraining has taken place, and it's documented. If you would like a copy of this, I can leave this with you. If you need it, I mean, there's a copy filed with the Ethics Commission as well, that the training, and I believe that, like I said, any violation, I hope you understand my point that we can't have general public comment on every single item, it doesn't seem, unless we have a general public item separate. The meetings would go on till 4 in the morning every day if that happened, and we're trying to run an efficient meeting to address as many people as we can. So I believe that's a reasonable solution to the nature of the complaint. And Mr. Hartz was allowed to make additional public comment that night. He wasn't removed from the building. A lot of the stuff he mentioned at the hearing on, I believe it was on the 20th, about that he was afraid to speak, that he'd get thrown out. That was the first time we'd heard any of that. I've never seen him shy away from a microphone. And I consider this matter to be a reasonable remedy, and I hope you agree.
Thank you. Anybody to present facts and evidence in support of the respondent? Seeing none, the matter is with the committee. Member West, do you have any initial thoughts on this?
Unfortunately, this all transpired before my time. I don't know if the primary respondent. It's my understanding that the sunshine training is an annual requirement for all new commissioners, task force members, et cetera, et cetera. So it may well have been that, you know, had he also been new at the time, he might not have done it. Unfortunately, this might just be my inexperience speaking, but I'm not really sure what additional training we could suggest something, but I don't know of any further training that we could necessarily compel, or any further training that obviously we've brought up issues with the good government guide's suggestions on following sunshine procedure, but I mean, if you know, he has signed that he has actually reviewed that as part of the annual training requirement, then I'm not really sure what else we could do. But again, that could just be my experience speaking.
Thanks. So I think that my goal for the meeting today would be to really leave with kind of a shared understanding of exactly what the ruling of the task force was. Because I think I listened to the hearing, and I've read through the materials. I also wasn't on the task force at the time of the decision. However, in reviewing it and considering it, I very much stand by it, the finding of a violation, and I think the key point here is, Lieutenant Falvey, you're right. There was an agenda item for public comment, general public comment. However, the particular item to which Mr. Hartz was speaking, namely the movement of an agenda item, didn't occur till after that general public comment. So if the position of the police commission is, well, that would have been the appropriate time to speak to this item, and we were, agreeing on that, just logistically, it wasn't actually possible for public comment to be given at that time. So I think it's fair to say, just on those terms, that there wasn't really a fair chance given for the public to speak to this issue of moving the item. Kind of in a more nuanced but also, I think, stronger way, the position of the task force, and I think an appropriate reading of the ordinance, is that it is very much germane to an item to bring up the procedure surrounding it. If that item is moved on the agenda, the movement of that item is very much relevant to the action that might follow from it, meaning the vote. And so, just as a member of the public might want to bring up the substance of the item, talk about the specifics of the case or whatever it is that's being heard, if an item has been moved and a member of the public feels that now the rest of the public doesn't have the opportunity to speak to that item, that's a very legitimate thing to be bringing up as a concern, because the commission or whomever is hearing this item may, having that brought to their attention, they now may say, oh, wow, maybe it's not, we shouldn't vote on this. We should wait until the public has had a chance to really hear it. Or any other sort of procedure that changes, that may have an impact on an item being heard. So, Lieutenant Falvey, actually, will you come up for a second? I'm wondering if do those things make sense?
It does make sense, and I understand what you're saying. I would like to point out that on our agendas, one of the items right before closed session, and I believe this was the night we went into a 4-hour closed session, one of the items before is any public comment on going into closed session.
Mm-hmm.
And when taking it out of order and doing that, that would have been an appropriate time to say, wait, you're taking it out of order. And I think also that night, the commissioners knew there was going to be a very long closed session, and they wanted to get that. It was 4.5 hours.
Mhm.
But anyway, we do put an item on our agenda that calls for public comment on whether to go into closed session. And if they didn't want to go into closed session at the time, that would have been, I think, the appropriate time to say, wait, I think you should go to this order for this reason or that, and they could have dealt with it then. But I don't believe any public comment was made at that point. But I understand what you're saying, that the timing of the general. It's interesting that I'm here with Mr. Hartz because I believe it was his insistence that we put general public comment at the beginning of the meeting so that the public wouldn't have to sit through some of the other things they didn't want to. And so we put it up at the beginning, and now here I am explaining why we did that.
I don't think.
But I'm just saying that you were talking about the logistics of having the public comment at the beginning didn't allow for the comment on the other matter later. And what I'm saying is that was it Mr. Hart's urging that we move public comment up to the beginning of our meetings?
I think that's another issue.
Okay.
Because I think that the real kind of heart of the issue is that if an item has been moved on the agenda, it is perfectly legitimate for a member of the public to speak about that fact when the
And what I'm saying is before we go into closed session, we have an item on public comment on whether to go into closed session or not.
But my understanding is not that the comment was about whether or not to go into closed session, but rather whether the item should have been split as it was around the closed session.
I mean, I understand what you're saying. I'm just. I didn't come here to re-argue the.
No,
the
and I
case.
don't want to
It seems
either.
like we are.
And so, I think what I'm most interested in is talking about moving forward. If there is an agenda change, it should be perfectly permissible. It is perfectly permissible under the ordinance for a member of the public to get up when part of that item or that item comes up and speak about that at public comment on that item.
You're right. And we do occasionally move agenda items, and since then I do believe there's been adequate time for public comment before that. This was an item, as I recall, we got halfway through item 3, which we thought was going to be a 15-minute item turned into an hour something, and I think that was one of the reasons to split it. Was I don't think they anticipated it was going to be that long, or we would have announced at the beginning of the meeting we were doing it. But I do believe, as best of my recollection, I did review with the different commissioners since this happened that if we're going to move an item, can we announce it at the moment we are aware of it, which they knew. But at that time, they weren't aware at the beginning of the meeting we'd be moving, and I think it was as a result of something that happened during the meeting, making a particular item protracted and still needing to get to that 4.5-hour item. And if I'm correct, we didn't leave City Hall before, it was about 5 to midnight that night that our meeting actually ended. So I think it was an unanticipated, but as a regular course, when we are aware that we are going to be moving an item, we do try to give as much notice as possible. And so I mean,
and I think that's good. And I want to make sure that
we understand that part of it. This was, I think, an unusual event, and Mr. Hart, you can ask him as well. I can't recall another time since then that we've had to split an item and this kind of type of issue would have occurred. So I don't see it being a continuing problem. They've taken the training to review the Sunshine Ordinance and its components, and I believe the practice has been, as soon as we're aware of a change in the agenda order, we do announce that. And we try to do it at the beginning of the meeting so that if we do have general public comment first, people can address it there.
Okay.
But I don't think we've split anything since.
Okay, thank you. I want to clarify that there, it happens in every meeting or not every meeting, but a fair share of meetings that an item has to be moved. Sometimes that can't happen right at the beginning. I think it's totally reasonable to have your public comment right at the beginning if your meetings are that long, so as not to, have the public have to sit through a lengthy amount of discussion before they get to contribute. The point is, if something gets moved, no matter when it gets moved, it's within the right of the public to speak to that movement when the item comes up. And it's a violation to tell the member of the public that he or she is not permitted to speak to it at that time. Mr. Hartz, I unfortunately think in this case, and I apologize for this, but I think that a lot of the protracted nature of this case rests on the shoulders of the task force, and it being an oversight in scheduling. I'm not exactly sure. I'm not exactly sure how the commissioner could have or should have reached out specifically, especially given the fact that the body that is supposed to be sort of being the watchdog on this is was equally dropping the ball. So I don't know. I don't necessarily see enough in the way of anything willful subsequent to what the task force has already found. Yeah, I'll give you a moment. Subsequent to what the task force has already found in violation, that would really make me feel like it was in the best service of this issue to bring it back to the full task force. And sort of similarly along the lines of the Brown Act, I think that because it's already been an issue, really fully heard before the task force, it seems like, again, I wasn't there, but they should have had the opportunity to consider that. And if you feel very strongly about that particular violation, it's within your right to bring it up as a complaint again with the task force. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I feel that it would be the best decision for us to send it back. But I'm definitely interested in hearing what you have to say.
Okay, since Lieutenant Falvey was not the police commission secretary at the time, I'd like to correct several mistakes that in his statement or his answer to your questions. One, I had nothing to do with putting the item first. This happened at the very first police commission meeting I went to. So I had nothing to do with general comment being moved to the front of the agenda, so that's not the case. Lieutenant Falvey said that there haven't been any subsequent occurrences of the issue that I raised, and there have been. I have at least two that occurred subsequently, and apparently after the training that they went through, the retraining, I would say, they still don't understand that putting people in a position where they come to speak to the commission and then simply rearranging the agenda without any notice and forcing those people to leave while they go into a closed session of an indeterminate length is really denying access, and that's why I want to pursue it, because I don't think they've learned a thing. Another thing is this is a yearly training, and the fact that they went out and did a yearly training says nothing about them doing it because of this case, but simply the fact that they're required to do it yearly. And both the presiding officer, Dr. Marshall, and Thomas Mizuko, who was then the vice president of the police commission, have been on the commission for years. And it's a yearly requirement. So for them to come in here and say, well, we went to a yearly training session since this happened, so we know better. Well, they knew better at the time. They knew what their responsibilities are, and they didn't like the fact. And very frankly, this is what Commissioner Rizzuto said to me. Can I interrupt you for a second? This is a public comment regarding items that were discussed in the chief's report, the commissioner's report, and the OCC report. Items that were discussed, not your objections to the items being moved around, so your comments are not consistent and not permitted at this point. And I said, and you're violating my constitutional right for free speech. And he said, oh, absolutely not. I would never do that. And I'll be honest, if you look at that, I think it sounds rather sarcastic. I'm just following the rules and procedures. So basically, this was not simply denying me the right to make a comment. It was based on the fact that I was objecting to their behavior, which is the very basis of 6715 and the Brown Act thing I cited, which protects the members of the public from coming up and saying what you're doing or what you have done is wrong. And then they play this game with the agenda where they say, oh, well, you should have made this during general public comment. And they say, then you get up and try that, and they say, oh, you can't do that because it's an item on the agenda. And then you get to the agenda item and say, oh, you can't do that. You should have done it during general public comment. So this is not something that I'm pursuing just because I have for grins and giggles. It's the fact that I really do not feel in any way, shape, manner, or form, other than attending something they were required to do under the law, as a yearly training, they have done anything to address what happened here and what continues to happen at their meetings. They do not have any compunction at all of making it very clear that going into a closed session and holding those disciplinary hearings are more important than public comment. And that if they have to shift things around for their convenience and the public is denied the opportunity to comment, they have no problem with it. In fact, if you look at that same recording, they broke in the middle of an agenda item, went out for 4 hours. I went home, filled out my sunshine complaint, mailed it, and then came back because I saw on SFG TV that they were still in closed session. And it turned out 4 hours that they were out. And they actually adjourned, Lieutenant Falvey says 10 to midnight. They adjourned at 9:34. And in fact, in my case, I said, one of the things I have here, I'm sorry, they adjourned at 10:34. They came out of closed session at 9:25, and they completed the rest of the agenda in 9 minutes. Why? Because there was no public comment except my attempt at it. And so I really do feel that this is not just, I'm not doing this because it was that one case and it was me. I watched a lot of people that night denied their opportunity to speak on agenda item 2 because it was split. But I've also subsequently, and I have said this to the commission, that moving the agenda around without notice really disenfranchises the people and the citizens who come. And I was in the elevator with some of those people that night, and they're going, damn police commission, it's all rigged.
Thanks. And, I really, I'm very sympathetic and agree with much of what you're saying, Mr. Hartz. I think that the issue is that that was the basis of finding a violation, of the task force finding a violation, and we're affirming that. And I'm interested, just you said that there have been other instances. Have you filed complaints for those instances, the ones that have happened since?
No, because I did not have standing. I watched them do it to other people who don't know the rights under sunshine and aren't able to stand up to the unfair situation they're in, which is a member of the public being told by somebody that you can't do something.
I just wanted to know whether you had or not.
No, because they know better now. They know that if I come up, I'm okay. The question is, what about other members of the public? Who's going to stand up for them? And that's the reason I feel that this is not something that should be dropped, because it isn't a lesson learned on their part. It's something that they have just learned that they can't do it with me, but the law says they can't do it with anybody. And that same night, they did it to somebody else.
Okay. So very much heard, and very concerning. Very concerning. Just please. You'll both have a chance to sort of give closing remarks in a second. It's very concerning that would still be the case. I think, unfortunately, with regard to this case, there's not much we can move on it. If that is in fact what's happening, that this is a continued occurrence, and you see it, please urge, where you think it's happening. Please bring it to our attention as you can, but and if repeated violations get brought before the full task force, or repeated complaints that then get found in violation get brought before the full task force, that's where we start to see real indications of willful violation and something that should be sent along, perhaps to the ethics commission or somebody else. But in terms of there being kind of direct action relevant to this case, again, it has unfortunately been a matter continued by the task force, and the respondent has cared enough about the issue to show up. I believe that the respondent hears and understands, or is indicating understanding of the issue to me today. So the most I can say, I think, my personal sort of feeling right now is the most I can say is, please, help us keep an eye on it. And Lieutenant Falvey, please take from our conversation today back to the commission and like really reiterate the importance of.
I don't want to come back anymore.
Right. So, okay. With that said, unless member West has anything else to say, so the respondent and then the complainant will have 3 minutes to conclude with anything.
No, I think the points have been made, and I think the lessons learned. I can only think of one other time. He mentioned that we've done this several times. I remember one time we moved closed session up a few minutes because it was a few items because it was a 10-minute item and it would free up a bunch of people. And as I recall, that was only 15 minutes. I don't remember hearing anybody complain about that. But I do think, if you watch the meetings now, that there's a great amount of time spent on public comment, and it's asked at every item on the agenda if there's public comment on this item, and people do get up and speak. So I'm fully aware of Mr. Hartz's concerns. I am at the meetings. I would try to keep those in mind myself. We have a deputy city attorney there. I don't envision a violation like this happening again. And I would, again, respectfully request that you report back to the full task force that the training that you would have recommended, which is, I'm imagining, consistent with the annual training, has taken place since then. And Mr. Hart says he's seen violations on TV, but I haven't had any complaints. And but I will keep in mind his concerns. Thank you.
I'll have to say I'm disappointed. And for the reason is that Thomas Mizuko, who is the person who actually committed the violation, has in no way, shape, manner, or form acknowledged even the existence of the task force findings. So basically, he got to ignore the law, he got away with stopping public comment, and there's absolutely no penalty involved. And again, this is not something that he was unaware of. He was aware of it. I said, "You're violating my rights." He said, "No, I'm not. I'm just enforcing the rules." And he had been through, I don't know how long has Mr. Mizuko been on the police commission? I don't know. It's before I got. I know, so it's he's been at least 5 years, and I think it's more like eight years. Or no, I think 8 years, no, 6 years is their max or something. I can't remember. But he's been on there. So he's gone through the training. He's a lawyer, and he is a member of the California Bar, and he must have some exposure to constitutional law courses when he was going through law school. So for him to sit up there and blatantly say to somebody, there are certain things you can't talk about, is really hard to believe. And that's really what he's depending on. He's depending on the fact that I'm just going to say, oh, I didn't do anything wrong, which was the whole case that they presented. We didn't really stop him. I think anybody who's heard me before the task force knows if I have 3 minutes, I'll use 3 minutes. And I didn't even use a minute. Because I was actually sitting there looking at this guy thinking, who the heck is he? Does he really think he has the right to override the federal Constitution, the state Constitution, the Brown Act, and the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force, the Sunshine Ordinance? And later, when I found out after doing research who he was and the fact that he was an attorney and all those other things, I thought it even more egregious that he would sit up there, say something like that, and actually do it knowing full well that what he was saying was a lie. But I have seen him do it to other people, telling them, and one guy said to him, well, how can you tell what I'm going to say isn't permissible if you won't let me speak it? Are you a mind reader? And that seems to be their attitude. Their attitude seems to be that we have to take public comment, and we'll listen to public comment when we're forced to. But if we can find some way of getting out of it, which is what they did this night and on at least one other occasion that I was there for, and another couple of occasions when they did it when I wasn't there, because I also watched them on SFG TV. And they really do not, they're really not open to public comment. So I really do feel that letting it go at this point is really nothing but a slap on the hand, for which they're paying absolutely no penalty. In other words, and I sat there, and when Mr. Mizuko did it to me, my feeling subsequently has been he's gotten away with this before. And the reason he's doing it now is because he thinks that most people don't know their rights. He can tell them they can't speak, and he can get away with it. And I don't think his attitude has changed.
All right, the matter is back with the committee. Do you have anything to add, Member West?
I mean, unfortunately, I sort of maybe a lack of imagination, but I can't really think of what we could do to move forward with this. I mean, we could refer it back to the full meeting, but again, I mean, if the perceived problem is with the lack of enforcement, I don't really see how that would help either of the parties.
I unfortunately disagree. Oh, sorry. I unfortunately agree. I think that there just isn't. There was no sort of mandate at the time of the violation that has not been that the violation, with regard to this specific case, has been repeated or reiterated, such that I really think bringing it back to the task force is appropriate. Again, I will reiterate, Lieutenant Falvey, just to speak very, very quickly to something you said. I think it's not so much that they took their one-year trainings. This is required of everybody who sits on a commission. What I really hope, it was this conversation that I really hope has been the clarifying point, that this was a violation. We can agree on this. This was a violation, and that we don't want it to happen again. And again, if it is a repeated occurrence, please bring it back. So is there a motion? Is there public comment? Public comment? No public. No. Seeing no members of the public in the audience. Without a motion, I think the matter is concluded. Thank you both for coming. Really appreciate your attendance. Mr. Clerk, will you call the next item on the agenda, please?
Item number 3 is sunshine presentation at Shelter Monitoring Committee for 1 hour on September 21st.
All right, so
That item, Mr. Chair, needs to be forwarded to the chair of the task force.
that's right, because I can't be there.
Because we cannot find anybody to make that presentation.
Mm.
So the chair may have to ask for a volunteer from the task force members, and we have several experienced people, so that's the way we'll have to take this item.
Right. I remember seeing that there was, if I'm not mistaken, an email thread discussing this as well a number of weeks ago. This may have been a different request for an appearance, but
I don't recall.
yeah. No, and I tried to search my mail and I couldn't find anything. So
Okay. Do you remember? Do you know of that or?
No, Mr. Chair, I don't.
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
All right.
So I can send an email to Chair Johnson and
Yes.
see what her recommendation would be. Would it be worth just double checking with Member Mene first?
I can do that before I contact Chair Johnson.
Okay. All right. So we'll do that.
Okay.
Will you call the next?
Next item is public comment on items not listed on the agenda.
Seeing no members of the public, public comment is closed.
Item number 5 is committee members' comments, questions, and requests for future agenda items.
Do you have anything that you would like to bring up at future meeting?
I mean, not off the top of my head, no. So unfortunately, as we were discussing outside, I've been taken to studying the law. The next step was to study the Good Government Guide and also complete my own Sunshine Ordinance training, i.e. sign the same document that Mr. Mizugo signed.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to defer to you, at least for this, my
Sure.
first committee meeting.
So, a few things that we'll start with a couple of things. One is we sort of started to touch briefly at the end of our last full task force meeting on this idea of, our Chair Johnson brought up the idea of issuing reports or press releases or some sort of thing on somewhat of a regular basis, kind of making public our findings. So one thing that I was thinking, it wouldn't have to be quite as serious as a report, and it could be more aimed at city agencies. But, issues like the one we just heard, just kind of clarifying what might be honest points of ignorance or honest confusions about the ordinance. For instance, if you change an agenda at the time of a meeting, if you move agenda items around, it's totally legitimate for a member of the public to comment on that movement at the time. Just sort of like, could be kind of cool to do on a monthly basis, or, pick out something that, was something that we thought, was a core kind of affirmation of the ordinance, and just say, FYI, agency heads, or whoever would be, responsible for kind of that. Mr. Russell?
Point of order, Mr. Chair. It's 5:13. Those folks will be back at 5:15. So
Okay.
if you want to continue this discussion in the next room, I'd be more than happy to move it there.
Okay. I mean, we can discuss it. We can discuss it now, or we can just sort of put it on the agenda as more of a formal item for next month.
and so yes, I think it's a great idea. I think I certainly have some ideas in terms of outreach to the press.
Mm-hmm.
And this will be quick, but a similar thing where essentially meeting highlights, i.e. Notifying members of the press of cases that have come before the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force that might essentially make for good stories.
Mm-hmm.
Just so that if we can't necessarily follow up, at least we can engage journalists in the work that we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I certainly think, and I think that coming up with an idea for a sort of here's a situation we've encountered, here's an order of determination as we've interpreted the Sunshine Ordinance. We think this is a best practice, something that's digestible. So, and over time, obviously, those could accumulate into something that could certainly be included in reference guides or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that both of those, I really like the sort of more press-oriented ideas too. And I think that, I don't want to put us in a bad place. Whenever it gets brought up in a full task force meeting, I feel like, it's usually at the end and people are tired and we don't have time, and then there's a lot of sort of debate about it. So I see, especially since the duty of this committee, one of the duties is outreach to the press, or sort of advisement about outreach to the press, we could potentially sort of develop some recommendations or some idea. We might even be able to walk in with some concrete suggestions of not just let's do this sort of thing in the future, but like, for instance, like this issue today, it would be really informative for the public to know about how to address public comment on agenda changes.
Mr. Chair, we are going into an extended discussion about the item which is not on the agenda.
All right, so let's put it on the agenda for next month, if that's okay.
That's okay.
Okay. Does that sound good to you, Member West? Okay. Terrific. Is there anything else before we conclude?
There's nothing, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Well, without objection, this meeting is adjourned.